Can folks see that okay?
Yes.
See nods? Okay, perfect. So right now I'm just obviously in Canvas, but if you go to syllabus, this is where the full description is. And so I'm just gonna read the description out loud, and then I'll start, and then I'm gonna jump over to the modules where the assignment is actually due, where you can actually turn in the assignment in the Canvas Dropbox. But first off, lifespan paper is worth 100 points. I think this freaks people out because it is fairly heavily weighted. So the final week of the quarter, you'll submit a paper around concepts from the final chapter, the death and afterlife beliefs chapter. This final reflective exercise is meant to replace the traditional final exam and provide you with the opportunity to elucidate some of your own learning that's taken place over the quarter. So for this assignment, you're required to do a 10 to 15-minute interview with someone in a more advanced developmental stage than you. So someone older than you. And this is kind of the example, if you've got somebody who's, if you're maybe in emerging adult, you'll want to do somebody in middle adult or later stages. So you're really looking for somebody who's got more life experience than you, and actually a totally different stage. I've had folks say, well, how about if I interview my good friend? They're a year older than me. I'm really looking for a different stage, and I ask folks to do this to kind of get a sense of what at some point they're going to be facing, either themselves, hopefully themselves at some point, but also understanding kind of maybe what folks could be like parents are going through currently, or maybe grandparents at some point. So that to give you a little bit more insight around that. So for the assignment, you're required to do a 10 to 15-minute interview with someone in a more advanced stage. You'll draw upon concepts from their chapter associated with the interviewee's developmental stage. So this is kind of where you construct your first set of questions, is really thinking about from their developmental stage. So you'll go to whichever chapter is associated to their developmental stage, and you'll want to start looking through the different concepts that are connected with that developmental stage, and then what are some things that are interesting to you that you might want to ask about that stage. So you'll draw upon concepts from the chapter associated with the interviewee's developmental stage and the death and afterlife beliefs chapter to construct your interview questions. So then you'll go, after you've kind of constructed questions based upon their developmental stage, then you'll look at the death and afterlife beliefs chapter, and you'll take a look at some of the concepts there and see if there's anything that stands out or what does stand out to you, and then choose those.
Oh.
Does that make some sense? So let's see, you'll then present a summary of your interview experience as well as your own reflections on the topics discussed. You are advised to use careful academic judgment when considering the structure of the interview, such as who will you interview and what questions you will ask. And I put this on there because in the past, I've had folks interview people like their boss, or maybe a parent or somebody that got a little awkward for them. And so the one with the boss in particular, they interviewed their boss, asked some pretty deep questions, and kind of made their experience afterward a little awkward with their boss there. So be mindful about the relationship of the person that you're interviewing, and make sure that it's not gonna, cause any strangeness or any trouble for you. So your lifespan presentation or paper will make use of two sources. So the source is going to be your textbook. So you'll select those 4 human development psychological concepts from this chapter associated with the interviewee's developmental stage, and 4 human developmental psychology concepts from the death and afterlife beliefs chapter to use as a framework to construct your interview questions. So this means you'll have at least 8 original questions, and you're welcome to ask more, and you're very welcome to ask follow-up questions as well. So does that part make sense to folks? How you're going to go and kind of develop those questions? So it's basically you're looking for concepts that sound interesting to you. Maybe if you know who your interviewee is beforehand, you can start to think about, well, what are some questions that I want to ask them about their stage? It's very common that folks, especially kind of in the COVID era, are asking parents, people that they come in contact with still, things like that. So obviously proximity and access to these folks is going to be something that's going to probably direct some of your questions and who you ask. Um, but are there questions about that yet?
No.
Not yet? Okay. So the second source is an article from a peer-reviewed journal. So if you can find an APA, American Psychological Association journal, that's great. You may not be able to, but they do have some developmental journals that you can check out. Um, uh, but if not, you want it to be a peer-reviewed journal. Published within the past 5 years, which addresses one of the human development psychology concept or topics relevant to your interview. So I'm flexible on that 5 year time frame, but try to get some new information if you can. If it's connected to some really pivotal research, maybe you're using like social learning theory or something like that, and talking about like Bandura's work. Some of his work is still kind of like the go-to classic work when it comes to that theory. Um, so that could work out too. If you have questions, definitely email me about that. So you'll want to find an article that is research data driven. So you want to make sure that this is original research that's tied to it. So that they're doing their own data collection, they're using their own statistical measures. And so you want to make sure that this is something, because I think the reason why I put this is a lot of times people will use like blogs that they find on websites, or they'll do, it's more of like an opinion type of a piece or something like that. You really want this to be from a peer-reviewed journal and have some original data collection and research that's connected to it. So the article must have the traditional sections associated with a research study. So, it's going to have the abstract, introduction, methods, results, discussion, references, all of that in there. So that's how you'll know that this is, okay, this is the kind of article that I'm looking for, journal article I'm looking for. So that means no review of literature or other types of articles, blogs, web-based articles, like Psychology Today, they're not considered to be scholarly articles. So if you have further questions, definitely you can use the librarians. And a lot of times they, if you ask them, a lot of times they'll do that lit search for you. And so you can say, hey, you know what, I'm in the psych class and I'm really interested in whatever the topic is, but I'm really not sure where to start. Can you help me out? Sometimes they'll just pull up a ton of articles for you. So definitely take advantage of our librarians. For the journal article, you'll be integrating the article and its contents into your paper to highlight its significance to your interview reflection rather than just citing it. So don't just cite an article, actually try to integrate what it is that you learned from the article into the write-up around the interview. So if it was, I don't know, maybe you found a study around midlife crisis or something like that. And then I want you to really talk about what the article said in connection to midlife crisis, and then maybe what your respondent said, your interviewee said to midlife crisis, and see how it kind of matches up or doesn't match up. Let's see here. So note that you'll be discussing the article and the implications of its findings in your interview in some detail. So not just mentioning it in passing. So you might have to even summarize some of the discussion or your own thoughts around it to do that sufficiently. So I put this in there as kind of a measure to keep you from going overboard. So the paper is a minimum of 3 to a maximum of 5 pages. And I put that in there because I've never seen a paper, under 3 pages that is sufficient. And in fact, most papers come back closer to the 5-page plus range. And so I usually am seeing papers between 5 and 8 pages long. So if you go over the 5 pages, that's okay. I used to not have this page limit in there, and I would get papers that were 20 and 30 page papers. And I don't necessarily want you to kill yourself over this assignment and have to feel like you want to write a huge paper like that. But I found if I do a 3 to 5 page, that I usually end up getting around 5 to 7 pages, is usually the range that I get. So the paper must be any readable 12-point font, APA style, and double spaced. So I say APA style. I'm very flexible with that, and really for the APA style, really just do that focused on the resources. So your resources page, make sure that all of those, the reference page, that all of those are cited, as well as in-text citations. Make sure you use APA style in-text citations as well. Other than that, the formatting, unless that's something that you enjoy doing, don't worry too much about the APA style. So there's going to be a rubric that we'll talk about in a second. This is kind of the rubric right here, basically. So let me just explain this. So this is how you're going to get your full points. So you want to explain how you chose and why you chose the 4 concepts or topics from the chapter associated with the interviewee's developmental stage, which you use for the framework to construct your interview. So it's not just here is the concept, and you want to talk about why did you choose this? Why did you think it would be interesting? Is there some connection to your own personal experience? So it's kind of almost like a reflection into in giving me kind of insight as to how and why you chose the topic. And that you'll do that for each of the 4 for the developmental stage that's connected with the interviewee. And then you'll also want to explain how you chose and why you chose the 4 concepts from the death and afterlife beliefs chapter, which you use as a framework to construct your interview question. So again, same kind of a thing. Make sure you adequately address how you chose these and why you chose these topics. So utilize information literacy skills to locate appropriate research and to create an informative final paper. So this is making sure that you are going out, finding a peer-reviewed journal, using in-text citations for the work that you're, for the work that you're citing in your paper, where you obtain your information. So you're going to be using at least your book and journal as sources, but a lot of folks end up using more, and there's no maximum to the number that you can use there. Properly referenced 4 psychology concepts from the chapter associated with the interviewee's developmental stage, and 4 concepts from the death and afterlife beliefs chapter. So this includes 2 parts: in-text citations. So don't forget this is where people lose points often. In-text citations of where in the book you found these topics, and then referencing the book in APA style reference. So if you're using direct quotes, you want to do that APA style. If you're just taking a portion or you're citing some information, definitely use in-text citation APA style. Let's see here. Did I say that? I did. Properly referenced an article from a peer-reviewed journal published within the past 5 years, APA style, again, using in-text citations as well. Summarizes the salient points from the interview. So this is where you'll just kind of talk about the interview, how it went, what were the responses. There's going to also be a reflection portion. So that's the next part. Reflect upon how the information from your interview relates to your own developmental stage and learning on the death and afterlife beliefs. So make sure to note what your developmental stage is, and feel free to compare and contrast the interviewee's perspective with your own. So you'll want to talk about your own developmental stage. So make sure that you say, well, I'm in the blank developmental stage, or as a student who is in the blank developmental stage, my relationship to these topics, and then you would go through the different questions, equates to this. Same with the death and afterlife beliefs, that you'll be talking from your own developmental stage perspective and what that might be like. And then you can also do compare and contrast. Talk about your interviewees' responses, how you may be similar or be different, how it relates to you. All of those things are important as well. So that's kind of the foundation of the paper. Before I take some questions, let me jump over to the rubric real quick. So if you go into modules in Canvas, and then you go all the way down to the bottom, you'll see the lifespan paper. And this is where, so I opened this up, and it's been open all quarter. So if you want to get a head start on this and in your quarter early, you're welcome to do that. This is really kind of the last big thing that you'll have to do in the class. So if you click on it, it should open up and you'll see the rubric. So you'll see how you'll get all the different points. So as long as you are following what's in the syllabus and then going through and following what's here in the rubric, you're going to do fine. You know, you're going to do great. And if you look at the rubric itself, even if you blow something, you know, so explain how the four chosen concepts or topics from the chapter associated with the developmental stage were used as a framework, and you didn't do that, or it wasn't clear, the worst that you're going to get is 50% off. So it's not like you're just going to completely blow a whole 20 points there. Even if you did the worst possible, you would still get points there. So hopefully that can allay some of the fears that you might have about this being weighted so heavily. So I think that folks will end up doing just fine on this. I think it ends up feeling a lot scarier because it is weighted so heavily, and because it is kind of flexible in the way that you present the material. The folks that end up usually doing the best kind of break it down almost into sections that really look at the rubric and then kind of use that as how you develop your paper, you know, based upon those different sections there. So as long as you include those in there, you're probably going to do just fine on the assignment. So let me open it up to questions. So what questions do folks have?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So for the peer-reviewed journal, are you wanting us to kind of base our essay off of that article, or are you just wanting us to implement the article into the essay?
More, I mean, you could do it either way. What most likely it's going to be that you're just going to integrate it into the paper. So the hard thing is that most of these journals, especially when you find specific like research-based articles, they're going to be very specific. So they're probably only going to address maybe one of your questions or even maybe one aspect of your question. So you won't be able to base your whole paper off of one article per se, but it should connect to the work that you're doing around that person's developmental stage, kind of enhance maybe the understanding of it. And you could potentially even use it in your reflection section, you know, how I learned from the article about this. And when I asked, you know, my participant about this, you know, so being able to talk about the article, what it presented to you, as well as how you used it in the interview and the reflection part. Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Other questions?
I have one question in regards to the questioning. So when I'm asking the question, say it's my mom, I'm going to ask the questions that relate to her chapter in life, I should say. Is that correct?
Her developmental stage.
Her developmental stage. That's right. Okay. All right. That's all I need to know.
Yeah. So again, you'll be looking at her developmental stage, and then you will look at the chapter, find 4 main topics that are kind of interesting to you that you might want to ask her questions about, and then develop questions around that.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah. And then the same will happen with the death and afterlife beliefs as well.
Okay.
What other questions do folks have? Good questions.
Kind of answered all mine, so.
Got them all? Okay. Well, so definitely doesn't mean that you can't ask more questions if you start to get into it and you're kind of like, oh gosh, what do I do about this? So definitely, you know, as you're going through the assignment, make sure that you drop me an email if you have questions, or if you have a larger concern and it's, you know, something's going on with your paper, and you feel like maybe we need to talk about it. Definitely, you know, in the syllabus, if we go back to the syllabus, my You Can Book Me, oops, wrong one, is up there. So you can schedule an appointment there via the You Can Book Me, or you can drop me an email. I think what's happening now with registration and everything is that my calendar is getting pretty full with advising stuff. So if we need to, I can try to squeeze you in some other time as well if you can't find a spot there. So just drop me an email if the You Can Book Me looks like it's not going to work for you. Any other questions or thoughts before we call it?
I have one more quick one.
Yeah, sure.
It seems like from looking at that, you're looking more for content as opposed to how well we can write an essay.
Yes. Yeah, this isn't like a English 102 class or something like that where I'm gonna nitpick and tear apart your grammar or something like that.
Okay.
The content is truly the important piece to me.
Okay. That is great news.
Yeah, yeah. Other questions? Any general questions about the class or anything? Hopefully everybody's in kind of a groove now. You kind of know what to expect. It's going to be a little chill for the next little bit. You'll run into another assignment, and then I tried to space it out so over kind of the Thanksgiving holiday, you didn't feel like you had a ton of stuff to do for this class. But you know, that could be an opportunity to really get a good start on your paper as well if you haven't already. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, thank you for your time this morning. Good to see you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Out
Thank you.
there. All right. We'll see you.
Bye.
Bye.